With the future of America's next-generation air dominance fighter now in question, America's king of the skies, F-22 Raptor, is set to extend its reign well into the 2030s, thanks to a slew of new multi-billion-dollar upgrades that are already underway. And the list keeps getting longer. Just last week, the Air Force awarded another billion-dollar contract to RTX, formerly Raytheon, for a slew of new sensor upgrades meant to help ensure the world's first ever stealth fighter remains the best ever at its air combat role. But with America's F-22 fleet already eclipsed in numbers by China's 5th generation J-20, China's carrier-capable J-31 stealth fighter making its way toward service, and a half-dozen other stealth fighter programs rapidly maturing around the world, the question American planners have to be asking themselves right now is just how good can you make the F-22 Raptor? And to give you the bottom line up front, the answer to that question is clearly really good, scary good even. But is scary enough? Let's see if we can figure it out. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. An indictment filed on Wednesday accused a half-dozen prominent American content creators of publishing what basically amounts to Russian propaganda in exchange for large sums of monies these creators allegedly did not know was coming from Moscow. And while this is certainly a story that's ripe for political bias, I'm much more interested in the differences in how this story is being reported in the United States versus in Russian state media outlets. And that is where Ground News comes in. Ground News is an aggregator that collects stories published by news outlets all around the world and places them all into a single easy-to-read feed, making it easier than ever to identify an outlet's political leanings, its ownership, and even its factuality rating. Right here on Ground News, I can see that 337 outlets have already covered this Russian propaganda story, including at least 68 left-leaning outlets and only 28 right-leaning ones. And right underneath the Ground News summary and bias comparison for this story, you can directly compare headlines from different outlets all around the world. Left-leaning outlets out of the United States use headlines like, U.S. officials allege Russian operatives illegally provided $10 million to fund videos by American right-wing social media stars, or right-wing influencers deny knowledge of Russian funding. Whereas Russian state media outlet TASS covered that same story with the headline, U.S. seeking to sterilize national information space from dissent, quote, some Russian diplomat. And this is a great example of how the same story can be covered in very different ways depending on an outlet's inherent biases. With the election coming up, I also love the Ground News 2024 presidential election page, which not only includes all the top stories related to this presidential race, but also blind spots, or stories that are seeing a lot of coverage in one political sphere and not in the other. I use Ground News every day, and you can too for a real bargain. Just go to ground.news/sandboxx with 2 X's, or follow the link in the description below to get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use in my research. Again, that's ground.news/sandboxx with 2 X's to get 40% off their Vantage plan that'll help you stay on top of things. The F-22 Raptor's sleek and stealthy design, incredible aerobatic performance, and unparalleled reputation gained through years of dominating air combat exercises and deterring adversary action the world over is more than enough to make you forget that this aircraft, in its general production state, has been flying since before the founders of Google even registered that domain. When the F-22 started flying, you could buy gas in Los Angeles for $1.36 a gallon, and the best video game in the world was GoldenEye 007. More than a quarter century ago, the F-22 Raptor's first flight ushered in a new era in tactical aviation, changing more about the future of air combat in a single afternoon than arguably any flight since Germany's Me-262 introduced jet propulsion to fighter designs. This new fighter was so powerful, it produced more thrust without its afterburners than the legendary F-15 Eagle could at full tilt. And when the Raptor pilot decided to lean into the throttle, the F-22's immense power even outstripped that of the SR-71 Blackbird. And all of that insane power was funneled through a pair of thrust vectoring nozzles that gave the aircraft unparalleled maneuverability in America's fighter stables. Equipped with the most advanced and powerful radar ever affixed to a fighter at the time, and new data-fusing avionics that could draw pertinent information from a bevy of cutting-edge sensors carried on board, as well as from a long list of others carried by other platforms, the F-22 provided its pilots with more situational awareness than any fighter ever had before. And in the court of public opinion, all of that falls short of the Raptor's true claim to fame, an unbelievably small radar return, delivered through a combination of advanced stealth design and radar-absorbent materials. The F-22 is so stealthy, in fact, that despite being the oldest stealth fighter in service on the planet, it also remains the stealthiest, with a radar cross-section that's generally estimated to be as much as 15 times smaller than that of the F-35, and maybe more than 100 times smaller than China's J-20. This combination of raw power, maneuverability, advanced avionics, and of course, stealth, all coalesced in a fighter so capable it not only became the basis for a new generation of fighters, the fifth generation, but it also arguably helped to introduce the general public to the very concept of fighter generations in the first place. The Raptor was so good that in 2002, 3 years before reaching operational service, former Eagle driver turned Raptor test pilot Mike Dozer Shower and 3 of his F-22 flying peers wiped out 12 F-15Cs in less than 2 minutes in one of several air combat exercises that saw Eagles falling time after time to America's newest bird of prey. The F-15 has never lost an air-to-air engagement to an enemy aircraft, with an unmatched air combat record of 104 wins and 0 losses. But even the Eagle was all but defenseless when it came to engaging the Raptor. I'll quote Dozer here. You could take 4 weapons instructors in an F-15 each, and you could have some lieutenant who's weapons clueless, and he's gonna find them all and kill them all. Then you put one really good guy in an F-15 against a Raptor, and he's still gonna get killed. There's that much of a difference in technology. Even today, some 26 years since the Raptor first took flight, the F-22 remains the measuring stick by which all new fighters are compared, with only one tactical aircraft eclipsing the jet's onboard technology, the F-35, and none capable of delivering the same combination of 21st century stealth along with decidedly 20th century brute force combat prowess. But despite the Raptor's long list of accolades, there is no denying that the F-22 also comes with a pretty long list of downsides. The fighter's production run, abbreviated to just 186 airframes and only 150 combat-coded or combat-capable jets, doomed the Raptor to increasingly high per-unit costs, similarly high maintenance costs, and worst of all, ensured no F-22 could be replaced if damaged, shot down, or just aged out of service. To put it simply, the Raptor may be the deadliest jet in the sky, but ever since the sun set on its production line, it's also been an endangered species. In fact, were it not for the F-22's early cancellation, it's all but certain that the Next Generation Air Dominance program, meant to field a replacement for the Raptor, likely wouldn't have materialized until much later, with the F-22 seeing consistent improvements throughout the rest of its intended production run, resulting in more modern and more capable Raptors entering service years later than the final F-22 was actually delivered. But now, as the Air Force's budget modeling begins to buckle under the weight of cost overruns associated with strategically necessary programs like the Sentinel ICBM, replacing the Raptor may have to be pushed out by years. And that means the fighter that once proved its mettle by taking on 4 of the most capable 4th-generation fighters in history and winning could potentially soon face a future where it needs to take on just as many 5th-generation J-20s or J-31s just to survive. And it's to that very end that the US Air Force has committed to spending nearly $11 billion on upgrades for its small fleet of F-22s, addressing long-standing shortcomings from the fighter, while also inventing entirely new systems and hardware, all aimed at ensuring the King of the Skies keeps its throne. And the first shortcoming the Raptor will need to overcome for Pacific operations is range. With roughly 18,000 pounds of fuel on board and a combat radius of between 470 and 600 miles, depending on supercruising or flying at supersonic speeds without the use of afterburners, F-22s meant to engage Chinese fighters in the air superiority mission would have very few basing options in theater. Installations like Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, only around 400 miles from China's coast, would all but certainly be the target of massive cruise and ballistic missile strikes, potentially cratering runways and destroying aircraft on the tarmac or in hangars. This could force F-22s to fly combat sorties from significantly further out, which would reduce the total number of sorties flown, while dramatically increasing logistical support needs from other platforms like refueling tankers. To address this range issue today, Raptors often fly with a pair of 600-gallon, non-stealth fuel tanks mounted on underwing pylons, each of which provides an additional 4,000 pounds of fuel for a new combined total of some 26,000 pounds. Now, the F-22's pair of powerful F-119 afterburning turbofan engines rip through between 30 and 38 pounds of fuel per mile, so these droppable fuel tanks stretch the Raptor's legs out to nearly 1,840 miles one way, or a combat radius of better than 900 miles in the best of circumstances. But these fuel tanks were not designed for stealth applications, and as such, compromise the F-22's best-in-class stealth profile. And even if the tanks are dropped, as pilots would do if they found themselves in a fight, the mounting hardware for the pylon and the detached plumbing for the fuel remain, which also has a negative effect on that stealth profile. As such, today's Raptors have to choose between range and extreme low observability, a trade-off that could be critical over the Pacific. And that's where the low drag tank and pylon program comes in. This effort aims to not only field stealthy underwing fuel tanks that don't have nearly the same negative impact on the Raptor's radar return, but that also break away clean, eliminating leftover hardware that could make the F-22 easier to detect after it drops those stealthy fuel tanks. Now, we've talked about this program at length and its long-term implications for other platforms like the F-35 in a video dedicated to the topic. So if you want to learn more about the low drag tank and pylon program, I recommend checking out that video. I'll include a link in the description. The next most pressing shortcoming the F-22 faces in the 21st century are its lack of infrared search and track and helmet-cued targeting capabilities. The first is a passive means of targeting that detects and tracks the heat signatures produced by enemy fighters, which can allow you to target even stealth aircraft that don't appear on radar. This capability was envisioned as coming standard on the Raptor, but was ultimately cut from the program as a cost-saving measure. But in the years since, IRST capabilities have become not just far more common, but increasingly necessary, as stealth itself has become much more ubiquitous around the world. Integrating that IRST sensor into the airframe of the Raptor would be a really big and expensive endeavor, and it seems the Air Force has gotten around that by instead adding stealthy underwing pods that are mounted outboard of those stealthy fuel tanks. And like those fuel tanks, these sensor pods will have a slightly negative impact on the aircraft's overall stealth profile, but that impact is clearly mitigated via radar-deflecting design and radar-absorbent coatings. Now, infrared search and track targeting capabilities have been around for a long time. In fact, The F-14 Tomcat was flying with an IRST pod mounted under its chin back in 1991. Today's IRST systems, however, are far more advanced and capable, and specifics regarding the latest and greatest targeting systems are obviously pretty limited, but it's worth noting that the F-22 Program Office specified in the program's request for submissions that the Raptor's new pod provide, quote, long-range infrared sensing and object detection capabilities. Now, long range is not a term with clearly defined parameters for this application, but there are some metrics we can look to in order to assess how promising the Raptor's new targeting chops may be. First and foremost, a long-range sensor would almost certainly mean an IRST system capable of spotting even stealthy threats from beyond visual range, which is generally considered to be 20 nautical miles out, or roughly 23 miles for those of us who aren't pirates. And speaking of pirates, the Eurofighter Typhoon's Pirate IRST system was touted as being capable of detecting subsonic fighters at ranges of 50 kilometers, or roughly 31 miles from head-on, and 90 kilometers, or around 56 miles, with a clear view of their engines from the back, all the way back in 2008. The Russian Air Force claims similar ranges for their OLS-35 system found in fighters like the Su-35. Unsurprisingly, claims out of China are significantly greater, but come with the standard lack of evidence to assess. Wang Yingyong, the technical director for Beijing A-Star Science and Technology, went on record back in 2021 to claim the EOTS-89 electro-optical targeting system and the EORD-31 infrared search and track system in development for China's J-20 was capable of targeting the B-2 Spirit from behind at ranges of 150 kilometers, or around 93 miles, and the F-22 Raptor at 110 kilometers, or around 68 miles. Now, it's important to remember that IRST systems don't function like radar, for better and worse. They're considered passive sensors, meaning they don't broadcast any energy to be detected by adversary fighters, but they're also limited by atmospheric conditions and a litany of other environmental factors. While we tend to talk about IRST systems individually to highlight the implications of their use, the real value is found through integrating IRST systems with radar and other onboard sensors to create a more robust targeting image, using different forms of detection and targeting to offset adversary countermeasures and improve the likelihood of a successful engagement. And while on the topic of targeting, the F-22's lack of helmet cued targeting is perhaps the most glaring shortcoming on the modern stage. Today, the Raptor is the only frontline fighter in the American arsenal that lacks this capability, forcing F-22 pilots to actually orient the nose of their aircraft at their opponent in order to lock on and fire. Of course, thanks to the Raptor's insanely powerful AN/APG-77 V1 active electronically scanned array radar and its stealth, this can usually be done from more than 60 miles away without the adversary fighter even being aware of your presence. But it is nonetheless a shortcoming in this fighter's pilot interface. Now, we don't know much about the helmet-cued targeting capabilities believed to be making their way towards service in the F-22, but we know the Air Force was testing a modified version of the Thales Scorpion helmet-cued targeting setup in the Raptor as far back as 2014. And while there has historically been clearance issues with the Raptor's uniquely shaped canopy, it seems like an engineering nut the Air Force would be eager to crack, and indeed, they may have, with the next generation fixed-wing helmet program that saw testing in the Raptor last year. The addition of helmet-cued targeting would allow the Raptor to take full advantage of modern weapons like the AIM-9X, which is famously so maneuverable that it can engage adversaries flying behind the launching aircraft. But until F-22 pilots can target these aircraft using their line of sight, this high off-bore sight targeting capability remains untapped in the Raptor. The addition of IRST, helmet-cued targeting, and stealthy fuel tanks alone will represent a massive leap forward in F-22 capabilities. But these are really just the most conspicuous changes to the aircraft. most of the rest of its ongoing multi-billion-dollar upgrade lies beneath its radar-absorbent skin, including new encrypted communication systems and a bevy of other new sensors being integrated into the F-22 as a bridge toward the NGAD fighter that's slated to replace it. One of the more secretive additions to the F-22 is the introduction of the new Government Reference Architecture Compute Environment, or GRACE. This open system software architecture will improve processing power, pilot interface capabilities, and even allow the aircraft to adopt software that wasn't originally meant for the F-22, like software designed for the F-35. Another new system being bolted onto the Raptor is the Northrop Grumman-led Embedded Global Positioning Inertial Navigation System Modernization Program, also known as the LN-351 EGI-M. This advanced navigation system is a mouthful to say, but it takes advantage of the Air Force's newest and most modern GPS-3 satellites, which can transmit directly to the aircraft via high-gain directional antenna that are encrypted and extremely difficult to jam or spoof. This in conjunction with an updated inertial guidance system that can function with high degrees of accuracy with only intermittent or limited access to GPS signals will allow F-22s to operate freely in GPS-denied environments as though nothing ever happened. Other new systems, like the Mode 5 Identification Friend or Foe Transponder, which is rapidly becoming standard across NATO air forces, will also be included in this upgrade. This military-specific identification system allows for what the Pentagon describes as a secure and encrypted data exchange through the use of a new waveform, making it easier than ever to discern between friendly and enemy aircraft at beyond visual range. The Mode 5 IFF integrates seamlessly with surface-based air defense systems like Patriot and Aegis, and as a lethal interrogation format transponder, can even receive responses from friendly transponders that are set to standby, further limiting the chances of friendly fire and beyond visual range engagements. There has even been mention of upgraded avionics, making it possible for F-22s to fly alongside AI-enabled drone wingmen, just like the forthcoming Block 4 F-35 and next-generation air dominance fighters. This alone would have a massive impact on the F-22's combat capacity, further bridging that gap between the oldest 5th-generation fighter in the world and the forthcoming 6th generation of jets. More upgrades to the aircraft's operational flight program, electronic warfare capabilities, and communication systems have all been listed in Air Force budget documents, but details regarding their improvements remain pretty few and far between. Overall, the F-22 fleet is expected to receive roughly $7.9 billion worth of upgrades by 2029, and by October 31st of 2031, that figure is slated to reach $10.9 billion. To put that figure into context, the F-22 upgrade budget is enough to purchase 132 new F-35As and still have enough left over for a very comfortable retirement. In terms of the 150 combat-coded Raptors in America's stable, that shakes out to roughly $72.6 million worth of upgrades allocated to each individual Raptor. Now, the F-22 was designed for an 8,000 flight hour lifespan, and with no means of replacing airframes as they age out of service, that's effectively it, barring an even pricier service life extension program. But in 2022, it was reported that the most heavily used Raptors in the force had yet to reach the 4,000-hour mark, and with peacetime operations usually accruing only 250 or so flight hours per year, it isn't unreasonable to say F-22s could keep flying for decades even to come. But the question remains, even with lots of hours left on their airframes and billions of dollars poured into upgrades, are America's 150 F-22 Raptors enough to take on hundreds of Chinese J-20s and J-31s as they continue to pour out of Beijing's production lines? And the objective answer is probably not. But then, could those 150 upgraded F-22s, accompanied by 300 more AI-enabled collaborative combat drones, backed up by hundreds of Tier 3 or Block 4 upgraded F-35s, all carrying next-generation air-to-air weapons like the AIM-260? Well, the answer there is almost certainly. And that's before we consider the potential air-to-air capabilities of the B-21 Raider. Super Hornets flying 100 miles back armed with the new extremely long-range AIM-174. Thousands of battle-proven fourth-generation fighters equipped with advanced electronic warfare capabilities, new air-launched decoys and jammers, and an ever-growing list of allies operating fleets of their own F-35s. To be frank, fielding 200 new NGAD fighters would, no question, offer the US the most direct and potent solution for the air supremacy question in the decades ahead. And it does seem likely that the next generation air dominance program will see production in one form or another. But it's the responsibility of the US defense apparatus to plan for the possibility that America may not see another high-end fighter emerge for years to come. And if that is the case, the F-22 Raptor may not be the best fighter America has the means to build in the 21st century. But without a doubt, it will still be the best fighter any nation has in the sky. And the truth is, that just might be enough. And with that ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below, and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.